Anyway, sorry.
Oh, so good afternoon and welcome to another LinkedIn Live from Miracle. I'm Margaret, Sherer, head of marketing here at Miracle, and joined with co-founder and CEO Rob Griffin. Rob, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
Glad to have you. So this afternoon, we're going to be discussing some challenges that are currently facing the iGaming and sports betting communities. These challenges are ranging from regulation changes, poor experiences with passwords, which is not unique to this industry, vulnerabilities to hacking, and frustration around traditional multi-step, multi-factor authentication, all which hinder the user experience and increase time to bet. We hope that we're going to answer some of your questions about how to overcome these challenges, and that you walk away today also encouraged to go find out your own login success rate. It might be alarming, but we're here to help. So if anyone is watching and has a question, please do put them in the comment area below, and we will answer those throughout. So Rob, before we get into multi-factor authentication, gambling laws, all of this, let's talk a little bit about the password. It is certainly familiar to us. It has a lot of issues, but they kind of suck. So can you talk about the passwords of it, please?
Yeah, it probably makes sense to just give a kind of high-level summary of what the issues are. Passwords have become, part of our everyday lives, and the reality is we don't realize in some instances the extent to which they're really costing both businesses and consumers, right? So I think there's probably three broad categories of issue here. The first is just security. So the reality is that account takeover has become a bigger and bigger deal, and this is definitely specific to gaming and gambling, where you're seeing quite a few checkout wallet services like PayPal that have been configured for users' accounts, and therefore really, if you like, shift the emphasis of security onto the actual account access rather than the checkout, because they provide basically a very low friction automated checkout. So that's an instance where the kind of potential losses can be much higher for users, but also the value to a hacker of the account could be much greater. So with that incentive, people are paying more for hacked accounts, and that really is what's driving this, because frankly, hackers are making big money out of just using dedicated bots. They can literally get those bots as a service on the cloud, then uploading a bunch of data in terms of users' data. There's so much of it, billions and billions of records available, hundreds of millions of records freely available. And those records, i.e. usernames and passwords, have a very high percentage hit rate. And so by uploading those records into a bot and essentially password spraying, or what we call brute force attacking gambling accounts, they're obtaining a relatively high success rate. That may well be below 0.5% or below 1%, but the reality is that they are able to then get, say, $50 to $100 for the account, and having paid very little for the cloud service and literally attacking simultaneously 100,000 accounts, they can make a lot of money.
Wow.
So this isn't going away. This is absolutely at the kind of still at the early innings, because there's a whole $billion economy that is worked up just from basically cracking people's passwords and reselling to other hackers the accounts that result. And then I think it also has to be said that users themselves, to be honest, are pretty complacent. So you look at the fact that when told that their password has been hacked, less than 15% of users reset their password.
Okay.
And so that's because they're aware of the fact that for the most part, operators have compensated them. So the point being here, you can't rely on customers to actually manage the security. They just aren't that interested in doing that. And to be honest as well, it's not surprising because they've got 150 accounts and they're asked to have complex passwords. So it's hardly surprising that they just can't remember all these different passwords. So that's kind of the security issue. But it's obviously a really big one, and in my opinion, it's only going to stop when we stop using passwords. The second is the user experience issue. So what's really apparent is that if you look at the fall off in people's actual conversion in making a purchase, they essentially walk away if they have to do some form of password reset, or if they have some issue remembering their password. So 75% of people that are in or needing a password reset don't then complete their transaction.
Oh, wow.
Now, you'd think, oh, well, that's not such a big deal because password resets are that common. They are unbelievably common, right? So there was a recent survey done of 4,000 users across the US and Europe. And what they found was essentially that people were resetting their password literally in 10% of days. So if you look at the number of email password resets that people have, they're kind of getting 40 in a year.
Wow.
So with that many resets of passwords, the likelihood of people actually not completing their transaction is really high, which is obviously just frustrating for them, but catastrophic for profits for underlying operators. And those resets take a lot of time, but they also take a lot of support cost. So if someone's on the phone, quite a lot of people need help. Like 30% of people need help for their password reset. They're on the phone for maybe 2-3 minutes. That right there is easily a $10 cost. So if that continues, then that creates a whole headache right there. So we've done security, we've done kind of user experience. I guess the other issue is just other forms of operational cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people claim that they didn't actually have control of their account when a bet doesn't come in. They say, oh, that was someone else that had my account. When an account takeover happens, they've got to then kind of forensically go and investigate who was to blame, how that worked out, and there's just the whole cost of the support around that. And frankly as well, it's much harder for operators to adhere to regulations, so the likelihood of them incurring fines is much greater. So yeah, I mean, it's a sorry for the long answer, but this is a complex issue, and it has many ramifications for both users and operators.
No, absolutely. And I think before coming to Miracle, I always took for granted how frustrating the password is, and it's just something that from the user side, that we've completely accepted that it's a bad experience and that you're just going to reset it, and that hopefully the operator is going to take care of you if you forget it or haven't written it on a post-it note somewhere, whereas then the operator is exposing themselves to so much risk and time and frustration themselves. So it makes sense that we've built our houses on very buggy foundations, if you will, that are, as you mentioned, incredibly insecure. So it makes sense that there's a lot of different regulatory bodies that are coming in and creating some regulations on how people log in and account setups. We know that New Jersey in the US was one of them that just happened in June. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So New Jersey in the spring of this year sort of talked about the fact that it wanted to really put a stop to account sharing and indeed account takeover. So you've got to remember that they're very much concerned with the end users' protection. So yeah, they basically at very short notice at the end of May said that having made two-factor authentication an obligatory option, if you like. So it had to be available for people to select if they wanted. It was then going to say, actually, it's not an option. It's mandatory for all incoming traffic. And so that really didn't give operators a lot of time to optimize what was a fairly poorly adopted option. And so people basically just switched. When I say people, operators just switched the optional 2FA to basically capture all incoming traffic. And for probably 80 to 90% of instances, that was SMS.
Mm-hmm.
And probably, as I say, 15 to 20% it was authenticator app. So 10 to 20% authenticator app. And those are, as I say, it was intended to prevent account takeover, at least reduce account takeover, reduce account sharing, but really it was about also safer gambling, because safer gambling is obviously the hot button in the industry. There have just been colossal fines in the UK over failure to adhere to safer gambling, and politically we're seeing some significant kind of repercussions from those safer gambling guidelines not being met with some fairly desperate circumstances of addicted gamblers. So it's something that the government, both the industry can't afford to continue making bad headlines about, and also regulators are really clamping down on. So with safer gambling, you've got to get both the device and the ID, and really that comes down to authentication, right? And then also in New Jersey, they put in a set of sort of best practice guidelines,
okay,
which really related to understanding what devices were authorized for a given account, so that they could limit the number of devices, and then potentially ensure that you could revoke a device if a given gamer self-excludes, so that they could essentially protect themselves from being able to access an account immediately. These are all measures to assist with safer gambling. And I can't emphasize the importance of the fact that in a world in which privacy requirements prevent us from having a database of people who are just saying no, I'm self-excluding, the only way for us to really ensure safer gambling is to have a good understanding of IDs and devices, and know the people that are actually connecting to the online service.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, and expanding on the safer gambling as well. You mentioned that most of these operators had optional MFA before the regulation came in, and most of them were on SMS and some with authenticator apps. We talked earlier about why passwords are a pain, but can you kind of articulate why this traditional multi-step, multi-factor authentication, like the SMS that's being sent to our phones, is just not really ideal for this community?
Yeah, sure. Well, it really comes down to the fact that there are just so many ways in which it can go wrong, right? Okay. So the first point is that conventional legacy two-factor authentication, the approach is really about improving security by improving, or increasing, I should say, the number of steps that users have to go through. And on the face of it, you'd think that that was just a doubling, but it's really not. First of all, you've got the username and password, and we've all talked about the nightmare that is. But then if you've got to receive a one-time passcode through an SMS message, you've got to have your mobile with you, you've got to have mobile reception, you've got to receive that text message. Very often those are delayed. Maybe people are in an international location, or with poor reception. You've then got to copy that code down correctly. That means you've got to leave the point in the app, and very often people get distracted. Maybe there's a delay. So there's just all kinds of ways in which this process can go wrong, right? So points of failure are just massively increased, and the simplicity it really is lost. So I guess the second point would be that actually in the business of entertainment, you really need to provide something that's timely, right? And people want, to place their bet, whether they're in, I don't know, half time. Let's face it, World Cup, we've all seen some pretty extraordinary results. So they may want to be, in a fairly hurried way, accessing their account, selling out of the position, adding to a position, whatever. So, they need speed to do that. And one of the main metrics that operators are looking at is, time to bet. How quickly can they actually get a user, whether that's registered or unregistered? They're measuring both, but to the point where they can place a bet. And so that time to bet is all designed to make sure that they're in touch with their kind of impulse desires, right? And that's I guess where the entertainment and the fun happens. And it's really those things that, if you like, go to contribute to probably the most important point, which is one you've mentioned already, but is the login success rate. And so what you see with SMS two-factor or indeed with authenticator apps is that the login success rate can really plummet. Now, we've had one very large institution come to us and literally cite on the basis of millions of logins, a login success rate of under 65%. That's incredibly low, but it gives you a guide that actually it really can be bad. Normally it's around about sort of 90%, but you're still talking about 10 to 15% of users that just don't make it. They don't get through the front doors, and that's just a crying shame, right? They're left frustrated and really with a kind of bad taste in their mouth. So the login success rate of passwords is already bad enough. If you compound that with the number of ways in which things can fail thereafter and the delay that takes place, it can drop to really problematic levels.
No, I appreciate that. So when we talk about login success rate, what we, how we define it here is that somebody's able to get to a site or an app and is able to log in either on a first go, or how quickly they're able to get into their account. The percentage of people that have been able to get into their account without having to do either a password reset, PIN reset, or even the fact of they've just abandoned it altogether.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I should point out as well that we actually have pretty hard data from what happened in New Jersey, right? Because or on the one side, essentially people that there was a 12% drop in traffic, i.e., that many people kind of choosing not to, or for whatever reason failing to log in. But that's not where the story ends, because actually once they were in, their conversion had seriously gone down as well. So actually the fall off in revenue was higher than that 12% number. And that all comes down to, the fact that they are not as in touch with their impulse desires when they do log in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Or just the moment in the match has moved on. You've missed the thing that you wanted.
Right. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
The free kick was made and you didn't want to, you didn't change your bet based on somebody's stance.
Football has already come home. How about that?
We'll hope. So yes, and I guess in general, as far as like login success rate goes, is this a metric that you think operators are in touch with? Is this something that we know companies, data-driven companies for sure are measuring so many parts of the user experience, but is this something that is done, and how can we encourage people to measure if it's not?
So I think people, when I say people, the US operators that we talk to, that obviously vary in size and kind of sophistication and resource, but they are cottoning on to the fact that there's a lot of data that has historically driven, the kind of actual work they do in casinos, because they're looking at so much statistical analysis of the people coming through to their bricks and mortar facilities or on the floor, that they realized that actually they really need to bring that same statistical rigor, if you like, to their online operations. And so we're trying to highlight these issues to sort of underline importance. There's definite sign that people are receptive, but you'd be surprised at the extent to which in the player account management system of these operators, or in their actual infrastructure, they just don't have that information with regard to login success rate. Now, why? When they spend, hundreds of millions of dollars on these facilities, it is because essentially for 20 years, passwords have been the only game in town, right? They haven't needed to measure the relative effectiveness of alternative solutions. So there's work to be done there, and that's why that's part of the message for us.
So thank you for that. So look, we talked about lots of challenges today. There's regulation, there's multiple steps, there's passwords in general. They're all adding friction to the user journey. It's creating lost revenue and a little bit of loss of fun for users. How can Miracle help? How can we solve it?
Well, so I think if you take a sort of 20,000 foot view and just say, well, what are the requirements here? Clear is that you need multi-factor authentication, right? It's no longer acceptable to go on one single factor. The second thing is that you need to go passwordless, because the reality is complex passwords. Really, if you have ABC 1 2 3 4 5, you may as well not have one. I mean, these are just so absurdly weak. So not only do you need, as I say, to go to MFA, but you need to be in a situation where you're not reliant on the user to actually kind of make a password complex. So you've got to go passwordless, as I say. I think the hopefully the message that we've conveyed is that there needs to be a really simple user experience. So when they originated, and when the kind of rules of complexity weren't so tough, passwords used to be pretty simple for people to use and they'd understand them. We're looking for something that's that straightforward, yet provides MFA and does so in a really quick, speedy way to keep players kind of excited and entertained. However, the other issue is that whatever solution they come up with has got to be deployable everywhere. That means all browsers, all devices, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the latest iPhone or Samsung device. It really has got to work with all devices, because if you have 5 to 10% of people who can't get in, you can be sure that the kind of support issues are going to go crazy, and that will result in huge amounts of cost. So that's obviously something that we've, as it were, borne in mind in designing Miracle, and we think that that was an essential part of the sort of blueprint for our MFA.
Brilliant. So with that, we're going to invite our CCO, Michael Tanaka, in to do a quick demo to see what single-step MFA Miracle style looks like. Hello, Michael.
Hi there. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining. So I believe you're setting up screen sharing right now. And if anyone watching has any questions, please do add them into the comment box below. And I think, Michael, what you're going to show us now is just essentially what is single-step MFA as far as logging in and authentication goes, and how can your login experience actually not hinder your user experience, keep your security more safe, and reduce time to bet.
And hopefully I can show that to you in just a few seconds. As you might expect, single step really does mean that, because what we're going to do is just hit login, and then we're pretty much instantly set up with a pin pad, which we can then type our pin. So 4 keystrokes, and we're complete on that basis. So if I do that again, I'll slow it down a little bit. So I'm going to log in. We get the pin pad. Within the pin pad, you can choose any number of IDs who could have enrolled onto this particular device. I'm using demo at miracle.com. Demo at miracle.com at an earlier stage selected the pin of 1245. And the reason why that's unhackable is simply because only I can enter that in this device. It's not a pin for my account, it's a pin for the device. And then we can also, even in a logged in session, enter it again. So let's say I want to buy into a game. That can all be done from within the same browser frame. So there's no distraction, no redirection, which is where you'd lose all your players. So really quick, really simple. That's 3 logins in just a few seconds.
Thank you. I would stay on that hand. That's just me. No. Yes.
Hey, take a poker player.
There we are. So thank you, Michael, for that. I'm going to say, have there been any questions so far? Do either of you have some thoughts before we wrap it up?
Well, it's all about, I'm login you love, right? So I guess that's what we're trying to convey today, that actually signing in doesn't need to be a real pain, and you'd be amazed at the extent to which users right now find it like pulling teeth. So hopefully we can change that situation and bring some good user experiences, both to gaming and gambling people, but also as a result indirectly to operators.
Well, I couldn't say that better myself. So with that, we have one question, or we have one comment over here saying that passwords and email address are both part of cybersecurity environment. Moving the access responsibility to the end user will take away the liability of the company providing the service to the end customer, or vice versa.
Will this take away the liability of the company providing? Yeah. So it's an interesting question.
It shouldn't change anything.
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't believe that that's going to change the liability. I would say that essentially what we've done here is provide the user with the ability to authorize their individual device under a given identity. That kind of is an additional layer where we've essentially made the second factor the presence of the authorized device, but we've kept intuitively the same issues around the use of a ID and a knowledge-based factor. So I don't think there's a and incidentally, obviously you could make that knowledge-based factor a biometric within an app, but I don't think that really is going to meaningfully change the dynamic.
Also, we're not actually getting rid of the email address or the ID, because if you saw in the demonstration, the ID still exists. All we're doing is we're authenticating in a different way against that ID.
Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you to everyone for viewing and joining us today. If there's any additional questions that come in, please do feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn, email us at info@miracle.com. Visit us at miracle.com to learn more. And we're really excited to be able to help this industry just make things a lot more simple, a lot more safe, and I think a lot more fun. So thanks, Rob. Thanks, Michael. And we will see you next time.
No, thanks for having us. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.
All right. Take care.